let us know what you think at the end, and I'll turn it over to the star of the show.
So we're really delighted to welcome you to this webinar about CAFOD's work in Sierra Leone. And we're very fortunate today to be joined by our country representative for Sierra Leone and Liberia, Kayode Akintola. Kayode has been involved in development management, civil society strengthening and social development for around 15 years. He has extensive experience in strategic planning, monitoring, evaluation and learning, institutional and capacity strengthening, people and program management and grants management. He's also led in the development and implementation of sustainable livelihoods and social development programs and projects. Kayode has worked extensively with local and international civil society organisations, and particularly he's worked in the field of food and livelihood security, HIV and AIDS, youth development, civil society strengthening, social development and accountability. Today we will hear from Kayode about Ebola as well as his work on livelihoods. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Kayode now.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. And good morning, everybody. And it is my pleasure. I bring you all greetings from Sierra Leone, from my colleagues and from our partners and communities that we work with. And I hope that today that I will be able to share with you some of the stories of life and hope in Sierra Leone with the support that you all have been providing to be able to do some of the development work here in Sierra Leone. After this morning, I'm going to be talking about Ebola outbreak as well as the recovery. And then, of course, I will talk about food security and livelihood, some of the initiatives that we did, and then I will talk about some of the gender empowerment in terms of how we have been empowering women and as well as young mothers. And then, of course, I would also just share with you a little bit in terms of how our community themselves have been participating in the process for the purpose of ownership, as well as for the context of sustainability in itself. Now, Ebola, as you would all rightly know, Ebola broke out in Sierra Leone in May 2014 for the first time. And this was after there was an outbreak in neighboring and Liberia. And so when Ebola broke out, it was such a crisis that even for us as an organization, as CAFOD, we actually didn't have the capacity in terms of what to do, in terms of how to respond. And our initial reaction was actually in terms of just raising awareness, in terms of social mobilization. So with our partners, like the Caritas Kenema, Caritas McKinney, as well as Caritas Bo, we provided them with some part of grants with which then they went ahead to do some social mobilization in terms of trying to raise awareness of how people need to avoid shaking of hands, need to avoid hugging, how people need to avoid touching the sick, and as well as, more importantly, touching the dead or even washing the dead when the dead ones, when their dead ones or loved one passed away. And so it was quite a very difficult period for Sierra Leone and Sierra Leoneans as well as Liberians across the whole region, because people were completely in a state of fear. Fear in terms of people weren't sure what to do. People weren't sure what was going to happen to them. Those who have fallen sick, people were so worried and concerned about their loved ones. And I remember very vividly that at some point during that process, communities in the UK rose up to come to support, to come in terms of providing help through the Ebola appeal that was launched, with which resources were provided for us to be able to address some of those challenges and to be able to contribute our own quota within that. And I would say that our Ebola work in terms of the response in itself, trying to curtail the outbreak, had maybe what I would call three major components. The first component was what I call the social mobilization, which is basically around raising awareness and trying to encourage people to maintain some practices in terms of hand washing practices, in terms of people trying to avoid not touching the sick, in terms of people calling the relevant government agencies to come and support when people are sick or maybe when people die. So that was a big part of the work that we initially started. And this involved quite a large number of people, including religious leaders. And actually the religious leaders, they played quite a very significant role because they were people who were respected in the communities. And so you can imagine where now religious leaders are saying to the people that people can no longer touch their loved ones when they die. People cannot touch the sick ones when they are sick. So it was quite a very difficult, period in the life of everybody here in Sierra Leone. And so the social mobilization, as that was going on, it was then being complemented also by what we call the safe and the dignified burial. And actually, that's the picture that just passed by now is actually the district emergency response center in Cambia, which is one of the districts where CAFOD took the lead in terms of response to it. And basically, what was happening was that we took responsibility as an organization working with our partners to be responsible for the burial of Ebola patients, and even not just Ebola patients, but entirely we were responsible for managing the burial in the entire district of Cambia. And I would say that during the entire period in itself, from when the outbreak happened and up to when Ebola was declared free, that our volunteers with whom we work and our partners who were responsible for those safe burial, and these are some of the burial team members during one of the training. It took roughly, they were able to bury almost over 3,000 people within the period. And this also involved where religious leaders themselves had to come and at a distance to offer prayer, because then it was really quite an epidemic that people cannot touch the dead except when people have used the whole personal protective equipment, such as you find that people were wearing the full personal protective equipment to keep themselves safe. And I would say that that went on. So being involved in that whole safe and dignified burial, these are some of the burial team members, normally every morning where they have like a debrief, that their supervisor who is backing the picture there. And you could see it involved both male and female. It wasn't, and that was the power of it, that Sierra Leoneans themselves took responsibility to lead the process of this response with resources that has been provided by so many people like you who sit in the UK as part of standing in solidarity with the people of Sierra Leone. Beyond just the safe and dignified burial, I think it is important to state here that during the whole period of this response, that we did not have any of the members infected by the virus. You see the picture of some of them. go and respond to an urgent call when there is they go, whether the person have died of Ebola or the person have died from non-Ebola infection, and it has to be treated first or safe and dignified. It's only much later that then when they have tested, that they can decide whether it was a death from Ebola or from non-Ebola. And then beyond the issue of the social mobilization, which was awareness raising in terms of people maintaining good hygiene practices and the safe and dignified burial, another component of the work was where CAFOD, with our partners, we were responsible for managing what I call the fleets. That is all the vehicles, all the motorbikes, all the logistics around the whole response in Cambia district was led by CAFOD and its partners. And this involved well over 100 vehicles, several hundreds of motorbikes in itself, including boats that were involved. This picture shows somebody here. This is one of the decontaminators. These are people who decontaminate the vehicle, because every time the vehicle is used to take a dead body, the vehicle return back to what we call the fleet site. That is where the vehicles are parked. That is where the vehicles are cleaned. That is where the vehicles themselves are then serviced and maintained to ensure that they were functional. And CAFOD was responsible for all of this in the district of Cambia. And we took the lead in that response. And part of it was actually making sure that all the vehicles were functional, were ready to respond to every call or alert. Those vehicles were maintaining good orders. Those vehicles were being fueled. Those vehicles were being decontaminated. And those vehicles were ready to go out to support the response. Again, these are the pictures, like I said, of the burial team members. So it was quite a very intense response in itself that CAFOD was involved with, along with our partners within the communities. And this also involves a lot of capacity building for those burial teams, for those decontamination team, for just every single person that was involved in this response. Probably, as some of you may be aware, it took Sierra Leone a total of 17 months and 13 days to bring this whole response to an end. When I say bringing it to an end, that was it was after 17 months and 13 days, precisely on the 7th of November 2015, that Sierra Leone was declared Ebola-free, still less than 3 weeks. Those were children that had to learn how to do some hand washing within the communities. However, what I need to say is that even though we have been declared Ebola-free, it is important to stress that Ebola has really decimated almost every sphere of life in Sierra Leone. In terms of, it has affected education, it affected the health sector, it affected the economy. Schools were closed for quite a very long time, and so children were completely out of school for almost roughly about 1 year. It was about 11 months that schools were closed. Beyond that, people could no longer go to market. Women could no longer go to market. A lot of people could no longer go to their farms, either because they were sick and couldn't go, or because communities have been quarantined and movements were restricted. Now, the picture you see there is actually a picture of a school children with a head teacher who is trying to take the temperature. So the whole Ebola itself introduced a new way of life for the people of Sierra Leone. But however, even though the Ebola, even though Sierra Leone has been declared Ebola-free, We are now on the part of what we call recovery, trying to get back to making sure that some of the impact of Ebola is being addressed. And one of the things that CAFOD has been doing with our partners is actually now supporting schools to provide education materials to pupils. So we're working in one communities where in one of the districts where we're providing 1,200 children with school equipment. Those school equipment will include things such as school bags, providing them with basic education materials, exercise book, uniform, and also trying to make sure that some of the children that have been orphaned as a result of Ebola are able to return back to school by enrolling them back in school. But also, we also continue to provide what we call hygiene facilities to those schools so that those proper hygiene sanitation can continue in schools as part of the early recovery. Even though schools are back, I would say that there are still quite a number of children that are not that have not returned back to school. And we are trying the best that we can, working with our partners to make sure that we support these children to be able to return back to school. So in terms of supporting education, is one of the recovery plan that we have and that we are currently doing with some of the schools. The other thing that we're doing with some of the schools is also try to provide what we call water wells as well as sanitation facilities. One of the things that Ebola has taught us is the fact that proper hygiene is one of the ways to also prevent Ebola. And so we are supporting schools by providing them with what we call a water well, because there are quite a number of the schools that do not have water wells. There are quite a number of schools that do not have toilet facilities for children. So we are also supporting some of those communities to dig water wells, to provide them with toilet facilities, but also to provide them with sanitation and hygiene facilities, such as buckets with soap in a way that children can always wash their hands. So those are part of what we're doing under the early recovery as it relates to the education sector. But also important to also stress is the fact that some of the primary health facilities, particularly in local communities and in villages, also from our assessment do not have access to good water or access to water at all. Some of them do not have proper waste disposal system. And what we are also doing is also to provide some primary health units within the limited resources that we have with water wells, but also providing them with sanitation and hygiene practices, either in terms of providing them with a proper disposal system within those health facilities, or also providing them with toilet facilities, where what they currently have isn't sufficient for them to be able to use. And then, of course, there is the aspect around livelihood, where we are also supporting livelihood program. And part of that also involves early recovery support. You would remember that when I started to speak, I talked about the fact that there are some of the communities that were quarantined. People could not go to markets. Women couldn't go to markets. Women couldn't sell their goods. Farming activities were affected. And so some of the things that we are also doing is also we're supporting vulnerable or Ebola-affected individuals, particularly women, with improved livelihood and food security for them. So helping them to improve, to provide them with seed for them to be able to farm, because it's the new farming season, but also for some of them, giving them what we call life skills opportunities. So situations where we provide them with skills opportunity for them to be able to have a livelihood options for which they can always fall back upon. So we provide livelihood opportunities to such individuals as well, particularly, and I continue to stress this, for women and for young mothers, because they were the most affected. They were the most vulnerable, in the sense that women from beginning have always had the responsibility to care for the sick, to care for the whole. And so a lot of them became much more even vulnerable following the Ebola outbreak. And so providing them with seed rice for them to be able to plant seed rice, providing them, and you will see it in course of some of the slide of the picture, some of the harvests that have come out from some of those harvests from the farms that we have supported, and then trying to encourage them to be able to get some of this produce now to market for them to be able to sell and to be able to earn some money. And like I also mentioned to you, that there are also some other women also that are not into farming, but that we are also supporting with what we call skills development. Some of them are learning what we call the tailoring activities, that is sewing, learning how to sew. Some of them are doing what we call the hairdressing, which is helping to make hair for women. And so they get some of this training and then get what we call a startup grant, with which they are able then to go and set up the activities that they need to set up. And so all of these activities are continuing as part of encouraging and helping women, and particularly young mothers, to be able to live a meaningful life after the outbreak of the Ebola virus itself. And so, because I do want an opportunity for question, I'm going to just wrap up in a couple of just maybe 2-3 minutes to just take some questions, so that possibly maybe I might possibly be able to respond to some of the questions that you we have, and I will share with you one case study of a young lady in one of the communities that we and she's in junior high school. This lady suffers from epilepsy, and this has been disrupting her education. And she actually said to us that she had been out of school until actually through our partners we were able to support her and to get a life skills opportunity in terms of sewing. And then she has used that part of the proceed that she had made from learning to sew for people to pay part of her medical bill, which has given her a hope now. And she also said that she attends the training after school. So she still goes to school and she's still able to learn this sewing skills opportunity, and then she makes a living out of it, and then she's able to support herself in school, supports also in terms of medical cost for herself. Finally, what I want to say is also the fact that we try as much as possible to also make sure that communities themselves are involved in the process of engagement. So there's a lot of consultation that goes on in communities, where communities are able to also raise questions, to raise concern, and to ask what sort of need do the communities really need, in a way that it is more empowering, and then communities themselves are able to make the decision in the long run as to what it is that they really want to have. These are some of the women that have been supported. These are some of the tomato from the farm that they work, and this is basically what they have been able to do, and then they take this to the market to sell. This is a rice by one of the women. So I'm just going to stop here now, and then I possibly would use question and answer to be able to respond, and then maybe provide some more clarity.
Thank you very much, Kayode. That was a really fantastic overview of the great work being done in Sierra Leone. And we do have a few questions coming in. I think Alban had some questions. And I think, John, you're going to unmute Alban's mic so he can answer them. Yeah.
Yep, Alban, you're on live now, so feel free to say hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Good morning, everyone. I've got a couple of questions, really. It was to do with the areas that CAFOD is working in Sierra Leone. I'd like to know whether what those are within Sierra Leone, and also the work in the schools, whether the work that you're doing in the schools is linked to the work that you're supporting in the Ebola outbreak. And I do have one further one, which is to do with, I got the impression that CAFOD was only leading in terms of burial of people. And I wondered whether there was any other work where they had either taken a lead or taken part in supporting the work to eradicate Ebola in Sierra Leone.
I think Kayode might have some problems in hearing your questions, Alban, so I think I'm going to type them for him. So would you mind repeating them just one more time?
Okay, well I did type them in, if that's the questions first of all were the areas that CAFOD are supporting the Ebola activities, and also the schools, whether they're linked.
Alban, I had that first question in terms of the areas where we're working around the schools, whether they are linked to what we're doing. And the answer, in terms of the areas where we're working, we have clearly 4 areas where we're working in Sierra Leone. The first one is called Cambia District. Another district where we're working is Kenema District. Another areas where we're working is Bo District. And then the third and the fourth and the last one where we're working is Western Rural. These are communities where we're working, and these are communities where we are going to continue to work, even post-Ebola. We have just recently developed our strategy, and we have said that we will continue to work in those districts and focus more our intervention around those places. I will mute now.
Thank you very much. That's useful. The other one was to do with whether the CAFOD was only involved in the burial activities associated with Ebola, or did you take any other action?
Yeah, we took other actions. When I started, the first action that we took and that we still continue to provide support on is what we call the social mobilization, which is actually in terms of sensitizing communities through the faith leaders for them to maintain good hygiene practices, and then to report Ebola or any sick person. So those hygiene practices was one of it. And then I did also say that beyond the safe and dignified burial, which was the second component, we were also responsible in one district, which is called the Cambia district, in managing the entire fleets, talking in terms of all the logistics for all the response work involving government response and all other key stakeholders within that particular district. So it's a kind of a three component response during the outbreak.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kayode. I wondered if I could ask a question. I would imagine that there's a very deep impact on society and the community after such a crisis. And I was wondering if you're starting to see the community and society sort of getting back to normal yet, or is it still very marked with what's happened over the past 17 months?
Thank you. And my response to that would be that it does vary from one community to the other, because honestly, some communities have been much more devastated with the Ebola outbreak. I mean, in communities where, for example, you find, I have a case of a young boy, a young man maybe, who comes from a family of, and actually he lost 13 family members, and just only of them are still alive. So it varies from one community. Some are beginning to move on with life. Some are still in that stage where they have been affected by Ebola. And I think maybe this is one other component that I did not mention, and apology for that, is actually that through our partners, we are providing what we call psychosocial support to individuals, to families, as well as to communities that have been affected by Ebola. Because actually, as a result of Ebola, there's a whole lot of discrimination. That's discrimination around survivors themselves. And even not just only survivors, but discrimination against households that have been affected by Ebola. And so part of what we are doing is actually providing psychosocial support in a way to help overcome those trauma that the Ebola itself had created. We are also providing psychosocial support, for example, for the burial team members, because a lot of the burial team members, even though they have done an excellent work in terms of helping to bring this epidemic to an end, some of the communities are not taking them back. Are discriminating against them. So it's also providing those psychosocial support in terms of helping to reintegrate those young people who were part of the burial team, reintegrating them back into the community and helping community to overcome all of the trauma that Ebola had created. And so back to your question to say that it's a mixed bag. Some have moved more faster than others, but we're hoping that with support, others will be able to get on as well.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Sarah, which is related to what you've just been talking about, actually. She was asking about the people who were employed to be part of the burial teams, about where they're working now after the crisis is over.
The answer is no. They have not gotten alternative employment. For the ones that were working with us as CAFOD, we are developing a system where we want to provide them with different type of life skills. Some of them want to go back to school, so we want to support them in going back to school. Some of them wants to go into business, and we are looking at how to support them with business. But from government, they have not been engaged. The government said it does not have the capacity to be able to absorb them. But for us, because we have a duty of care, they have done wonderfully well, because without those young people who have sacrificed their life to do those safe and dignified burial, we probably won't be where we are today. So we are committed to supporting them to get back to life and to continue to do their work, to continue to get livelihood opportunities.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have another question from Fionn, which is how difficult was it to recruit people to the burial team?
Very interestingly, it wasn't really quite for us. It wasn't really very difficult. As soon as we did the sensitization, we had people shown up, but then it was basically we had to provide training to them and really check with them that they have really thought through what is it that they want to do. And like I said, we were quite very delighted that no member of the burial team during the entire process got infected, and this was simply because they really maintained good level of what you called the right protocol that they were supposed to keep.
Thank you very much. And another question from Martin, which is about, did you ever find the original cause of the infection, and how prepared is the community for any potential subsequent outbreaks?
The cause and preparation for any outbreak, I would say that in terms of the cause, to be honest, what WHO, the World Health Organization, because the outbreak started in Guinea and then got into Liberia, and then from Liberia into Sierra Leone. And what we had from the World Health Organization was that this was caused as a result of the virus was within animals themselves. And people kill animals in the forest just to eat. So animals such as bats, animals such as monkeys. So we were told that those animals are reservoir for carrying those virus, and that was where it started from in Guinea. But for Sierra Leone, it was a transmission from human to human that brought the first case to Sierra Leone. In terms of preparation, the government is leading, as you know, the government is leading in terms of this whole response. And so all the facilities that have been provided, I would say that government have continued to, facilities will be maintained to ensure that they are able to respond to any spike or maybe to any new case infection. However, for us, one of the things that we have said we would continue to do as an organization is to continue the social mobilization messaging within communities where we work. I don't know, you may have been following the story. Liberia was declared Ebola free by the World Health Organization. But on 2 different occasions now, Liberia have had resurgence of new cases. And the last resurgence just happened last week, Friday. Liberia had new cases now, and I would say that the government has been able to respond effectively in trying to curtail that.
Thanks very much. And just to return slightly to what you were talking about before, Alban had a question about, can you tell us how many schools that CAFOD supports with the water wells and the hygiene programs that you're running?
10 schools.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Oh, sorry, Jess, I missed you. Jess is asking, in your opinion, Kayode, what is the #1 priority in our current recovery stage?
Sorry, I didn't hear that. Do you want to take it again, Elena?
Yep, sorry. Jess is asking, in your opinion, Kayode, what is the #1 priority in our current recovery stage?
I would say that our #1 priority is actually livelihood, food and livelihood security for women and children. I mean, people's livelihood have been affected, and because livelihood has been affected, that is having an impact on food security. Sierra Leone has been a food insecure country even before the outbreak of Ebola. Now, as a result of Ebola, what that does is that it makes the country more food insecure because throughout the last farming season, a lot of people could not go to the farm to tend their farm or to do harvesting or to do the proper weeding because of the quarantine in places, because people could not get the right labor support to go there because there was a fear that permeated the whole communities and the entire country. So there would be what you would call hunger season coming. And again, because of the quarantine, a lot of people lost their livelihood because the little savings that people had, people have used them up during the period of the quarantine. So livelihood, for me, will continue to be a major priority. But having said that, it's difficult. I know it's difficult to just say only one thing because they are also interlinked. I would say the issue of water and sanitation will continue to be a big priority for us if we have to help reduce the risk to health hazards for people in this country.
Okay, thank you very much. So I don't think we have any further questions. So I would like to say thank you very much, Kayode, for a really interesting talk and a wonderful opportunity to find out more about CAFOD's work in Sierra Leone. And I hope this will be the first of many webinars. So thank you very much.
Before you all go as well...
maybe just before you go...
Oh, go ahead, Kayode.
No, just before we go, for me, I just want to say thank you to our supporters, to colleagues in the office and the diocese for all the support financially, for all your prayers for this country. It's been amazing to have people stand in solidarity with this country. And I want to echo the voice of our partners and the communities who have been so appreciative of all those supports, that people have stood with them through the difficult period, and they hope that the supporters, colleagues will continue to remember this country in prayers as we move towards the recovery phase. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kayode. John, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just before you all go, this is probably going to be the first of many webinars, so if you have a few minutes later today, please do fill in a survey because it helps us improve, get content, and make these things work a lot better. There were a few audio dropouts, apologies, as those were a bit beyond our control, but please do take a few minutes, tell us what you think, and we'll go from there. So thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone. Bye-bye.